Australia's housing sector has become a two-speed market, with the smaller capital cities doing much better than the bigger ones. Bunnings named the country's most trusted brand, and China lands a spacecraft on the dark side of the moon. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Monday, the 3rd of June, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show, stick around for two things. First up is the week ahead with our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas. Always worth a listen to that. And then your interview with Paul Miliotis, who is the co-founder and managing director of M Squared Capital, a supporter of Fear and Greed.
Yes, all about private credit. And in M Squared's case, it takes security over mortgages, and it allows people who might not be able to get a loan from a bank to get money otherwise. It has a growing part of the market. In fact, it is absolutely booming, private credit at the moment. So it's great to talk to Paul about what's going on there. Stephen, the chat with Stephen, well, it's a big week this week. We've got economic growth figures. In fact, we've actually got minimum wage case today as well. So plenty going on in the economy. So well worth listening to Stephen as well.
Yeah, there is plenty of good listening coming up after the show. But first, the show, Sean. And the main story this morning, house prices had their strongest month in May since late last year, but there are some big disparities between capital cities, with Perth on a tear and Melbourne struggling.
House prices are rising in most capital cities despite the cost of living crisis and 12-year higher interest rates. It's the mid-sized capitals, though, that are leading the way, with Perth prices up 2% last month, Adelaide up 1.8% and Brisbane 1.4%. Sydney reached a new milestone, with prices hitting a record high, beating the January 2022 peak, according to CoreLogic. During May, prices rose 0.6% in the harbour city. However, prices in Hobart and Darwin went backwards, while in Melbourne, they were higher, but only just. Brisbane is now the second most expensive capital city, overtaking both Canberra and Melbourne's median dwelling value. CoreLogic's research director, Tim Lawless, said the extremely low level of supply in some of the mid-sized capital explains the surge in prices in those markets. In Perth, Brisbane and Adelaide, the average number of listings is about a third or maybe up to 40% below the 5-year average. It's not surprising that you're actually seeing these surge in house prices in those markets. In Hobart, about 40% more than the 5-year average, probably a hangover from COVID, and you're seeing prices go backwards. Supply and demand working very nicely in the housing market.
Yeah, Sean, it seems like, I know this is quite a broad statement, but it seems like the housing market in Australia has changed in the past 5 years. And kind of thinking back to perhaps some of the major events that might have occurred over the last half decade, is this all COVID related?
In part. And coming into the pandemic, Melbourne's median dwelling value held around a 37% premium over Brisbane, for example. ACT's median value was approximately 24% higher. Now we have Brisbane values increased more than both those cities. In fact, Brisbane values have increased at more than 5 times the pace of Melbourne values since the onset of COVID, and substantially outpaced growth in the ACT. But there are other factors as well. In Melbourne, net interstate migration hasn't helped, nor has an increase in land tax for investment properties, a government ruling there. Also, rental vacancy rates aren't quite as low in Melbourne. The bottom line in all this is that the housing market definitely remains strong. Over the past year, Perth house prices are up 22%. Brisbane 16%, Adelaide's 14%, Sydney's more than 7%, while Darwin, Canberra and Melbourne have been around 2 or 3%. Only Hobart has gone backwards, and very slightly. The combined capital city figure is nearly 9%, and across the regions it's 7%. So if you were investing and you're getting a 9% return or a 7% return, you'd still be pretty happy.
All right, taking a look at local markets now. How did things finish up on Friday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed up 1% to 7,702 points. Healthcare stocks did best, while energy and consumer staples also did well. The real estate sector was the worst performer. Among the large caps, CSL was one of the better performers. QBE, Coles and Aristocrat Leisure also did well. Goodman Group, not so much. In fact, it was the worst of the top 200 for the week. The bourse fell just 20 points. I'd say that's flat. Futures trading suggests the market will open higher today.
Okay, checking international markets now, thanks to Blue Chip Communication, the experts helping financial services companies market, communicate and grow. And Sean, I know this is really kind of my day for making broad, sweeping statements, but it's a pretty important week for international markets.
It sure is. On Wednesday night, Australian time, the Canadian Central Bank meets. Then on Thursday, it's the European Central Bank. Both of those are expected, not guaranteed, but expected to start cutting rates. That'd be the first time that has happened in this current cycle. The date of the first cut in the world's most important economy, the US, keeps getting pushed out. We'll have to wait and see on that. But it is good to see some central banks now taking action. And I think Australia will follow in 6 months or so. In terms of the numbers, gold and oil didn't do a lot over the weekend. Brent crude is around $81 a barrel, and gold's around 2,300 or 2,320 US dollars an ounce. Aussie dollar starts the week at 66.5 US cents.
Sean, I know it's going to be a big week, but I've already picked out what my highlight of the week is going to be.
Already? So early. Go on.
It is going to be the Fear and Greed newsletter, which comes out on Wednesday. And I don't mean to put a whole lot of pressure on you to really, really deliver, but I'm expecting great things from the newsletter this week. And of course, now is a fantastic time to get on the mailing list for the newsletter. Head along to fearandgreed.com.au, pop your email address in there, and you get it on Wednesday morning, about mid-morning, after Sean's had a chance to really digest all of the big stories of the week, and then you just unload and tell us what you really think.
Is that how you think of it? Maybe.
Yeah, a big unload from Sean Aylmer.
Yeah, excellent.
Which is actually a terrible way to sell it. It is definitely worth it. You know what? It's been going off in the last few weeks. We've been getting terrific growth in the newsletter and terrific feedback from people who have been enjoying it and enjoying the spin on stories, your particular view on stories. And you really don't hold back. And I like that. So head along to fearandgreed.com.au, pop your email address in, and you can get it on Wednesday morning. And ignore everything I've just said about it if it makes you feel a little bit icky when thinking about the newsletter.
Icky?
No?
Why would a newsletter make you feel icky?
Just the thought of you we'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, there's plenty of speculation this morning that former federal Treasurer Josh Fryden will put his hand up to run at the next poll in his old Melbourne seat of Kooyong.
He lost the last election to high-profile Teal independent Monique Ryan, and the current candidate is Amelia Hamer. Following the Australian Electoral Commission's draft boundary determination that was released on Friday, Kooyong is considered more Liberal-friendly, apparently prompting Mr. Frydenberg's rethink about politics. He's currently chair of Goldman Sachs Australia. The Victorian Libs aren't all in favour, though. Some have come out and basically said put up or shut up. The Libs in Victoria are very factionalised, of course, so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out.
Oh, yeah, it certainly will be. Defence Minister Richard Marles says he had a, quote, very frank conversation with his Chinese counterpart over Beijing's backing of Russia in the Ukraine war, among other matters.
While refusing to go into the specifics of the conversation with Chinese Defence Minister Dong Yang at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, Mr. Marles said he covered a lot of territory in the discussion, including unsafe incidents at sea, which Mr. Marles called both unsafe and unprofessional. He told Sky News that AUKUS was not raised.
Wesfarmers-backed Bunnings has retained the top spot among the most trusted brands in the nation, while the two big supermarkets, this is interesting, have actually fallen out of the top 20 entirely.
Yeah, so Woolworths went from second spot in December down to 34th at the end of March. That is quite a fall, according to Roy Morgan. Rival Coles fell from the fifth most trusted brand to the ninth most distrusted brand in the current rankings. Aldi is now Australia's second most trusted brand. See who's winning in that supermarket war, at least on the PR front. Marginally ahead of discount department store Kmart in third place. The biggest mover in the top 20 is Aussie Post, which improved 4 spots to rank 6th, just behind tech giant Apple and car manufacturer Toyota. Telco Optus remains the most distrusted brand in Australia after their shocker last year. That's the third straight quarter that's happened, followed by, this is the distrusted brands, followed by social media giant Facebook, Meta, embattled airline Qantas, private health insurer Medibank, telco giant Telstra and media company News Corp. Roy Morgan CEO Michelle Levine said Australians' distrust for companies has grown significantly in the past year as cost of living concerns and high inflation have raised concerns about companies being motivated by higher profits and excessive price increases and not being focused on putting the customer first.
I know you frequently accuse me of just focusing on one thing from within a report, Sean.
Yes, I have done that.
I'm afraid I'm about to prove you correct once again. Aldi being the second most trusted brand.
Yeah.
Got a bit of a gripe with Aldi at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Go on. Go on.
I have spoken at length, if not on this podcast, then definitely on how do they afford that. I tend to spout off a little bit on occasions. And one thing that I love about Aldi has been their Logix dishwashing tablets. Have you ever used them?
No, are they good?
Oh, they are the best. They are absolutely the
They're
best.
expensive dishwashing tablets.
Oh, these are not. They cost a fraction of the price of other brands, and they do an infinitely better job. And I'm a bit of a dishwasher enthusiast. I'm a fanatic. Anyway, I have a bad feeling that Aldi may have discontinued these. I've checked multiple Aldis over the weekend, and I can't find them anymore. I can't even find a spot where they are housed on the shelf. So this is just a little message to Aldi. This is not me using fear and greed as my own.
No. Personal.
No, to push a personal agenda.
Yep.
But please, Aldi, you're the second most trusted brand. I trust you will make the right decision and restore the Logix Platinum tablets to the shelves.
I've never used them, but if they work well and they're cheap, I'm all for it.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. Now, Australian investors are more engaged in activism than at any time in more than a decade as active campaigns surge and companies really bow to pressure from agitating shareholders.
I reckon Australian podcasters are more engaged in activism than ever before too, after what we've heard in the last minute.
Yeah, if we just judge it on the last 60 seconds alone, I think you might be right.
This year is the biggest for activist campaigns on record, according to data compiled by Bloomberg Intelligence that goes back to 2011. So far in 2024, there have been 27 campaigns launched on listed companies, more than double the average over the past decade for the same period. Lendlease, of course, is the latest Australian company to concede to investor demands after the real estate firm last week said it will sell its international assets. Activist shareholders, including Tanara Capital and Alan Gray, have been pushing the firm to overhaul its global ambitions, and the move will leave Lendlease very much focused on Australia. 5 of this year's campaigns are targeting companies worth over $1.5 billion, including campaigns against oil and gas giant Woodside Energy and agricultural firm GrainCorp. There have been some high-profile stoushes over the past few years. Probably the biggest was 2022. Tech billionaire Mike Cannon-Brookes blocked a demerger by AGL Energy, citing climate concerns. Then Gina Reinhart later scuttled Albemarle $6.6 billion takeover of lithium miner Liontown Resources. There was also Australian Super blocked a Brookfield asset management-led multi-billion-dollar acquisition of Origin Energy. I think it's a good thing that we have more activist shareholders rather than these discussions going on behind closed doors.
Now, Mexican fast food chain Guzman y Gomez plans to list on the ASX later this month with a $2.2 billion valuation.
Guzman confirmed it will proceed with a fully underwritten float of 11.1 million shares at $22 apiece. There'll be no general public offer, so you can't get in ahead of the float, but once it lists, you can. The money raised will be used to fund growth, primarily expanding its restaurant network in Australia. In April, Guzman raised $135 million in private markets and said current shareholders are generally keen to subscribe. Again, obviously not going to struggle to find the money. Co-founder and co-CEO Stephen Marks will control about 9.9% of the company. I reckon if that's $2.2 billion, 10%, $220 million. Nice work.
Sean, Qantas has reached a multi-billion-dollar agreement with Perth Airport for a new terminal and runway, which will create a new long-haul aviation hub in Western Australia.
Under the 12-year deal, Perth Airport will invest about $3 billion in the new infrastructure. In return, Qantas and its low-cost carrier Jetstar will relocate to the new terminal and add 4.4 million seats each year to and from the city by the time the site opens in 2031. That's according to Qantas. Management said the new hub would strengthen travel options between Australia and Asia, Africa, India and Europe. According to a report in the Fin Review, Qantas and Perth Airport have long been at commercial loggerheads, including a years-long court battle over fees and capital costs and stuff like that under Qantas's former CEO, Alan Joyce. So this is something of a breakthrough.
How about this one, Sean? The Mona Gallery in Tasmania is about to exhibit an album so rare and so valuable that only a few people have ever listened to it.
Yeah, so when we're talking about an album, we're talking about a record. We're talking about music. So housed in an ornate silver box, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, recorded in secret by the Wu-Tang Clan over 6 years, was designed to be a piece of fine art. Only a single CD copy exists. The record by the pioneering hip-hop group is the most expensive ever sold. It's now been loaned to Tasmania's Museum of Old and New Art, Mona. Over 10 days this month, Mona will host small listening parties where members of the public can hear a curated 30-minute sample of the album. It's pretty incredible. Recorded in New York City and produced in Marrakesh between 2006 and 2013, the album includes the 9 surviving members of the group. It includes a hand-carved nickel box and a leather-bound manuscript containing lyrics and a certificate of authenticity, and a legal condition that the owner cannot release the 31 tracks for 88 years. Quite an incredible story.
It certainly is, and I can guarantee one thing, which is that our Fear and Greed colleague, Adam Lang, who is our judge on the Fear and Greed Weekend Edition, who is an absolute music nut, will be doing his very best to try and get tickets to one of those public listening sessions.
I bet he will be, yeah.
Oh, my God, he will just be so excited he won't sleep for a year. Turning to international news now, Sean. Exit polls in India's 6-week election indicate a resounding victory for Prime Minister Narendra Modi's party.
Voting finished over the weekend. Counting has begun. The exit polls suggest Mr. Modi's BJP party will easily clinch the 272 seats needed for victory. The vote counting will commence tomorrow. A big win would enable the party to push through policies that are seen as crucial for boosting India's economic growth, which is already among the world's fastest, according to Bloomberg.
Sean, I appreciate you including this story.
This is for you.
It does feel like it's for me. A Chinese spacecraft has landed on the far side of the moon, boosting the nation's efforts to compete with the US in a race to send people back to the lunar surface for the first time in more than half a century.
The China National Space Administration announced that Chang'e 6, that's CHANG'(E)-6, Chang'e 6, successfully landed at the designated landing area, according to the Xinhua news agency. Chang'e 6 will attempt to be the first to collect sample from the moon's far side and transport them back to Earth. The mission is China's second to the far side, following a landing by the Chang'e 4 spacecraft in 2019. No other country has landed on that half of the moon. It's a much more difficult area for communications because it never actually faces the Earth. That explains why no one else has gone there, but quite an achievement for the Chinese spacecraft to land on the far side of the moon. It's very sort of Pink Floydish or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think the dark side of the moon, but same deal.
Or Gary Larson. Do you remember those comics? Far Side collection?
The Far Side, yes.
Yeah, they were always great. What does that tell you, Sean, about the two of us? That you go straight to Pink Floyd and I go to Gary Larson comics.
That explains us to a T.
It actually does, doesn't it? All right, up next is two things. Fear and Greed, the week ahead with our resident economist, Stephen Koukoulas.
Yep, all about what's happening this week, particularly economic growth figures, very important.
And then after that, Paul Miliotis, your interview with the co-founder and managing director of M Squared Capital.
Yeah, private credit, who uses it, who funds it. Great chat with Paul.
Yeah, plenty of good listening for your Monday morning. They are both coming up in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au, where you can sign up for that newsletter I've mentioned a dozen times. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Monday, the 3rd of June, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.